I'll continue to judge any asshole who causes unnecessary suffering to innocent beings. Okay, go off, dramatic Acadia 6200. Hi, welcome to Humane Experience. It's Haley, and today I'm just gonna be responding to some vegan threads on the vegan subreddits. The top post right now says if it weren't for government subsidies, plant-based foods would be doing numbers right now. Let's click and read into that. That sounds interesting. So, rant. Things are so economically dire in a lot of places that there's a huge opportunity right now for vegan options to be financially attractive to people who are struggling to afford meat and dairy products. But somehow, products that are made from animals that eat literal tons of plant foods cost less than products made just out of the plants themselves. I know I'm preaching to the choir here, but it's insane. The amount of government subsidies, in the US at least, that go into making meat artificially low priced demonstrates how die-hard free market evangelists are always actually very willing to manipulate the market, and the playing field is tilted against veganism as a result. I've never wanted anyone to be a capitalist lobbyist before, but Jesus fucking Christ, I need plant-based food manufacturers to start getting in there and buddying up to the Congress people or something. Anyway, I like what Jonathan Safran Foer wrote in his latest book, We Don't Need to Reinvent Food, but to Uninvent It. The future of farming and eating needs to resemble the past. Everyone ate way less meat when there was less external interference in what we ate. Interesting. Yeah, they raise a good point. It is a lot more expensive to feed people on meat, animal product-based diets rather than plant-based diets. That's why the government does subsidize meat to make it affordable to people. But when it comes to these plant-based food manufacturers, they just don't have the same amount of power or money that the cattle and beef industry have. I guess I should read people's responses though before I say too much. It does make me think though, when they're talking about everyone ate less when there was less external interference. I'm thinking about the new food pyramid, how they flipped it upside down. It's more like meat and fat heavy now. People always complain about the food pyramid, like, oh, it's so terrible. And it's not perfect, but it's honestly, like the old food pyramid, it's not a bad guideline. Like, if people actually followed the recommendations and followed the food pyramid, if they were having 3 to 4 servings of, I think it's 3 to 4, 3 to 5 servings of fruits and vegetables a day, 5 servings of grains a day, people would be a lot healthier. But they're not following the recommendations. They want to blame the recommendations on why people are sick, but they're not following it. Anyway, done with that rant. Let's read some of the responses. I've been saying this, turns out the upcharge for plant-based milks at coffee shops is the actual price milk would cost if it weren't for the subsidies. So we are paying for everyone else to have a discount on their mammal secretions. We should get the discount instead. Everything's upside down. Oh no. This hits the most for my soy milk. It's like double the price of dairy milk for the same amount, but to be fair, eating plant-based, at least for me and others I've talked to in person, have actually lowered the grocery bill. For me, it's about half of what it was before. I 100% agree with you though, especially with a lot of soy-based products. That's interesting because I feel like the soy milk I buy is only like $2 or something. I guess I'm not paying attention, but soy milk really isn't that expensive. Sometimes if you go to a coffee shop, they'll want to charge you extra, which is kind of stupid, but like they were saying, we pay extra so everyone else can have a discount on their mammal secretions. Let's go to a different post. So this one says, Trump just ordered an end for using primates in experiments. The Trump administration has directed the CDC to halt all scientific research on monkeys and apes, advancing its broader push to phase out animal testing. I did hear about that, actually. That was awesome news. And then they also ended the dog tests that they would do in the military. I'm not too knowledgeable about it, but the U.S. military and the Navy, they were using dogs for trauma training and weapons testing, so just brutal things being done to these dogs that Luckily, they're not doing any more. Let's see what people are responding to with this. I know it's a bit controversial because obvious reasons, but let's see. Doesn't Elon use monkeys for his Neuralink stuff? Are they feuding again? Absolutely thrilled for the monkeys, but terrified it's just a pawn game. Someone responds, no, this only affects the CDC, so about 500 non-human primates, give or take. It includes direction for the CDC to work towards ending other animal testing, but that doesn't include mice or rats, which constitute 95% of CDC research animals. Their goal here is to hurt medical research, not help animals. That's their opinion, yeah. What I've heard is that their motivation was more about, well, it's just a waste of money, which makes sense, and they want to use that money towards other things, which in the bill that was made, they were going to be putting more of that money towards funding the military and AI. So, obviously great about the animals, but you can't just assume that the administration actually cares about animals. I do know Tulsi Gabbard, she's vegan, she cares about animals, but other than that, the rest of them, they're not vegan. It's weird because, this is another comment, it's weird because at the same time they just started testing on human beings with high Hep B rates. Half of babies will get a vaccine, half will not. I don't know what that means, okay. Great news, interesting they haven't included dogs and cats. Someone else said, interesting they haven't included mice and rats. Yeah, because that is the majority of animals in labs are mice. Someone said, hell yes, now just need to expand to end testing on all animals. And you know what? Maybe we can use this as like a wave, try to catch the wave and be like, okay, great. We've ended the monkey testing, the vivisection, these cruel military dog experiments. So now let's just phase out all animal testing and non-consensual actions towards animals. This one sounds interesting. Someone said, stopped being vegan, one of the worst decisions of my life. Let's read this. I became vegetarian in my teens and went vegan 22 to 35. I wanted to be able to enjoy more meals with my meat-eating family, so I tried pescatarian for a couple years. I was vegan so long. I was curious if the diet change would make me feel a lot better. It didn't. It made my health the worst it had ever been. Gallbladder infection, pneumonia, and the worst part is what it did to my soul. I know different bodies need different things. I can't handle raw vegan as a woman because I lose my periods on it, so I need carbs and cooked foods. But I feel 100% better on a plant-based diet. I love animals so much, and I feel bad I played a part in the dairy industry, even if it was super minimal. My immediate reaction when I'm reading this is she mentioned that she can't handle raw vegan. I'm wondering if she was raw vegan before she started going back to eating those meals with her family, because it is possible that if she was on a very restrictive diet, she wasn't getting enough of what she needed and started to maybe crave more dense calorie, fatty foods and stuff. So that would be my prediction at least, but let's read and see. The top response is saying, raw vegan is two completely different things stuck together. Veganism means you don't believe that animals are commodities that we can use and exploit for our pleasure. It means that you avoid exploitation as far as possible and practicable. I don't know why people think that they shouldn't cook their food. That's a diet, not an ethical stance. Yeah, I think there's something to be said for like eating lots of raw foods, and I do follow some raw influencers because it makes me want to incorporate more of the fresh foods in my diet, but I think that some people take it really far to an extreme and become dogmatic about it. And then veganism gets confused as being like this super restrictive diet when it's not. You can eat anything you want on a vegan diet. You can have burgers and pasta and pizza and fries and chicken nuggets if you want to, and like, you might not feel the best if you eat that stuff all the time, but I don't know, just try to have a good balance, I guess. Like, I try to eat healthy most of the time, but then like I still like going out to eat. I still like to get ice cream sometimes or chocolate or whatever. But yeah, let's keep reading. Someone said, yeah, raw vegan and veganism gets mixed up way too often. Veganism is an ethical stance about not treating animals as commodities. It has nothing to do with refusing to cook food. Raw is just a diet choice, and for a lot of people, it's straight up unsustainable. Cooked, carb-rich, plant-based meals are still fully vegan and totally valid. I agree with that. I think that promoting a raw food diet to everyone is not realistic, or like might not be possible for everyone to do. It's expensive to eat that much produce. You need time to sit down and eat that much and prepare all your meals at home. A lot of people are on the go. They need to just like go through a drive-through here and there. And that's totally fine. You can do that in a way that's still plant-based. Like, unfortunately, we don't have plant-based drive-throughs everywhere, but you can modify things. Like, you don't know how many times, like in the past, I've been in a pinch and go through a Mexican drive-through and just ask for a bean burrito with rice in it, or some places have the Beyond Burgers there. I believe Burger King has the Beyond Burger, Carl's Jr., depending on the location you live at. The one near me doesn't anymore the last time I checked, but you can always find something. Everyone's pretty much just talking about the raw food. It seems like everyone had the same kind of response as me when they heard it. It's like, okay, we see why that didn't work. But at least you're back now, so that's good. So this one says, did you at some point in the past hate vegans and or found them annoying? Let's see. Okay, this person said, no, I just didn't understand them. When I was a carnist, I really only knew about vegetarians. This was in the mid-90s and veganism wasn't well known yet. When I turned vegetarian in the late 90s, I started to hear the occasional thing about vegans, but I didn't understand why people needed to be vegan. I naively thought cows produce milk, chickens produce eggs, and it doesn't hurt to take them. I thought that vegetarianism was enough, and the internet wasn't widespread enough at that point for me to just look it up. Okay. Yeah, I think that's common. I don't understand vegetarians because for me it's like, if you're gonna take a moral stance, like that's already a big decision to decide, like you're not gonna eat meat. So it just seems like you would think a step further with like, okay, well, how do I get the milk? Because it's like all cows for dairy are slaughtered the same way as meat, and all chickens used for eggs are slaughtered. All dairy cows and egg-laying chickens are killed as babies. So it's like weird to me that we treat it differently than meat when the animals are being killed in both, and they are being exploited more as well. This person said, I didn't hate them, but I did find them annoying. It was my own cognitive dissonance talking. Someone said 1000% LOL. Like, I used to pick fights with vegans online when I was 12 to 14 years old. Cringe. I remember reading a study that the people who are most bothered by vegans, it's because deep down they know vegans have a point and it triggers self-defensiveness. So the people who are the most vocally against vegans are also more likely to be swayed vegan. At least in my case, it was definitely true. LOL. Well, that's good. At least they changed now. I've experienced that too, though, when people seem to be more triggered or more reactive. It's because they know I'm right. Okay. Someone said, I didn't, but that's more from lack of exposure than anything else. I didn't do social media or anything online really until the COVID pandemic. Come from a highly rural and indigenous community with no vegans or vegetarians that I knew of. I don't recall consuming any media with them in it either. Okay, that's an interesting perspective. Honestly, a lot of the people I meet in real life actually haven't heard of vegans before or don't know what it is. So that's totally fair. We forget when we're on the internet, we're like, oh, everybody's heard of this, but it's really not that commonly talked about. Someone said yes. When I went vegan, the first thing I did was make some phone calls and send some emails to apologize to people I'd given a hard time. I let them know that even though I was an opposing force to them, their mere presence did force me to think a little. Their presence also showed me that the lifestyle is doable, even if I was a twat waffle about it at the time. Someone said yes, and it's the entire reason I went vegan. I was vegetarian for a couple months before going vegan, but I made the switch after seeing a post about how free-range and cage-free eggs are a scam. It wasn't the post itself that made me switch. I thought it was propaganda at the time. Boy, was I wrong. It was all the people in the comments hating on vegetarians, calling them hypocrites. I remember one comment in particular that was straight up insulting vegetarians and spreading information on what I thought was propaganda. Annoyed the hell out of me. I decided to do my own research to prove them wrong and make them look like an idiot. I did not prove them wrong. Turns out I was the idiot. I went vegan that same day. I was arrogant and wanted to essentially humiliate another person, but instead very humbled very fast. So there is now a random Redditor in the R Vegan subreddit who's responsible for turning me vegan. I don't know who you are, but thanks for the wake-up call. I have since learned to be more open-minded and do proper research on topics before sharing information. I have grown as a person since that experience. That's so cool. I love that response. There are a lot of posts in here about why do people hate vegans, the science of why people hate vegans, why are people so disrespectful towards vegans. Vegans are hated by meat eaters, and scientists claim to know the reason why. I'm wondering which one to pick. This one said, I'm becoming vegan, but wow, I didn't realize that vegans were hated so much. I've been flexitarian most of my adult life, but have always wanted to become a complete vegetarian. In the last several months, I've learned awful things about the egg and dairy industries and have made the decision to be vegan. I've started following vegan pages on Facebook, and oh my god, the trolling from meat eaters on those pages is insane. It's happening on pretty much every page I've followed. I don't understand it. I've always admired vegans for their dedication. I'm just blown away by the hatred. I don't understand it. Vegans aren't hurting anyone. Why are people like this? Is this what I will be facing as a vegan? How do you deal with the hate? Also, my Facebook friends have been mostly ignoring my vegan posts and has me a little sad. Aw. Well, that's nice that you admire vegans. I feel like people fall into one of two categories. When you tell them you're vegan, they either are like, wow, that's so awesome, like you have a lot of discipline, and I'm like, no, I don't. I'm just don't want to hurt animals. But they either fall into that category or they fall into the category of like being triggered by you or annoyed by it. Someone said, because vegans make people realize that they're doing something wrong. Yeah, I think that's the main one, the main reason. I kind of want to see what the science one said. A new study published in Food Quality and Preference suggests that hostility towards vegans may be rooted in envy rather than simple dislike. Researchers from the University of Vasa in Finland surveyed 3,600 people across Finland, the UK, Germany, and Sweden using fictional shopping lists to gauge public attitudes. They found that people who prefer vegetarian or plant-based diets are often viewed as environmentally conscious, healthy, and moral, but also trigger negative emotions like fear, envy, contempt, and anger in meat eaters. The study suggests that these mixed feelings reflect broader social tensions, especially around changing eating habits for environmental reasons. People may feel threatened or judged by those who have already adopted plant-based diets, leading to resentment or even exclusion. Social acceptance remains a major barrier to wider adoption of meat substitutes, as food strongly influences one's social identity and sense of belonging. I like the point about the social aspect because I think that is a big barrier. Maybe people are envious because they're like, oh, you're willing to stand on your own, you're willing to be your own person, and you don't care if your opinion is going to be popular or if you're going to agree with everybody else, because not everyone has the confidence to do that. So I think that people who are vegan are often really independent and don't really need anyone else's approval. They're people who are like, okay, if this is the right thing, I'm going to do it regardless. And so that's an admirable trait. And I think that's why people fall in the category of either admiring or being a hater, basically. Someone said it's almost like everyone knows there's something inherently wrong with the way animals are treated, and the existence of vegans holds a mirror up to those perpetuating this treatment. It's the same psychology as people coming up with excuses for homelessness or police brutality, blaming the individual so they don't have to address the fundamental societal issues involved. So someone said, this is another topic we're picking. Someone asked, why do some vegans judge vegetarians even though none of us live 100% ethically? Hey everyone, I've been thinking about something lately and I wanted to hear your thoughts. I often see vegans being quite harsh towards vegetarians, saying things like, if you eat cheese, you're still contributing to animal cruelty. But isn't that a bit contradictory? Let's be honest, none of us live completely ethically. Even as vegans, we often buy clothes from brands like H&M, Nike, or Adidas, companies that rely on exploited human labor. Humans are animals too, so that's still a form of animal exploitation. And yes, dairy isn't harmless either. If a vegetarian eats about 30 grams of cheese per day, over a lifetime that adds up to the milk production of roughly 0.2 cows. So statistically, one cow dies for every 5 vegetarian who eats cheese like that throughout their life. That's nothing. That math doesn't seem right to me. Yeah, I don't know if I agree with that math, because milk producing cows only live for like 4 years on average, so I don't think that they would make enough milk in that 4 years to feed 5 vegetarians for life. So I'm already skeptical about this person because the math isn't mathing. But let's keep reading. They say, but still, none of us are perfectly ethical. We all exist in systems of exploitation of humans and non-human animals that we can't completely avoid. So my question is, why do we sometimes judge vegetarians so harshly instead of seeing them as people on the same path, just at a different stage? Wouldn't compassion and inclusion do more good than moral hierarchy? Curious to hear your thoughts. Yeah, I guess like they raise a good point because I do tend to be pretty harsh on vegetarians. I guess I'm more harsh on vegetarians than meat eaters because they claim to be more conscious about how their decisions affect animals. But you're right, none of us are perfect, and maybe they don't want to completely eliminate their harm towards animals or minimize it as far as possible. Maybe they just want to minimize it a little bit and they're like, okay, that's better than most people, it's good enough. Let's see what some of the comments say. Someone says, if you eat cheese, you're still contributing to animal cruelty. This is just an unequivocal fact. Personally, I don't judge vegetarians. Judging a person to me implies believing someone is a bad person. I don't believe vegetarians are bad people. I think buying and consuming dairy is a bad thing to do, but it doesn't make one a bad person. You could say I judge the action, but not the person. I feel the same way. And then someone said also, I was vegetarian before becoming a vegan, as were many vegans. A recent poll on the subreddit showed that most respondents were vegetarian first. It's a natural progression from omnivore, vegetarian, vegan that we ought to encourage that transition. Harsh judgments are an ineffective way to do that. It raises defenses and is counterproductive even if true. That's the way human psychology tends to work. Pointing out the facts and challenging people to do even better is a good thing, but harsh judgments are not. Note your 0.2 cow calculation doesn't include calves that are just byproducts of dairy, nor does only looking at deaths include the lives of suffering these animals lives, I think you're underestimating the harm here. Yeah, I'm glad someone else pointed out that those numbers were a little bit weird, because that's true. They weren't talking about the calves. In order to keep producing milk, dairy cows are re-impregnated every year without consent, against their will. The farmers will inject them with bull semen, and once their babies are born, they're ripped away from their mothers right after birth, and they're sent off to be turned into veal, or they're confined in crates to be raised to be dairy cows themselves. And then after a few years of these pregnancies, having their babies taken, having their milk taken, the cows are slaughtered. Someone said, I see vegetarians as dangerous. They are funding the same murder, rape, and all the suffering as meat eaters, but they make it seem like by being vegetarian, they are on the side of the animals and compassion. This leads the average non-vegans thinking that vegetarian is enough, and veganism is quite extreme, which is total bullshit. Also, I think your argument that since we can't possibly live 100% ethically, we shouldn't judge vegetarians is a fallacy. I'll continue to judge any asshole who causes unnecessary suffering to innocent beings. Okay, go off, dramatic Acadia 6200. I like that. I would never went vegetarian. I've never called myself vegetarian. I've never been vegetarian. I went vegan right away. Okay, I think we have time for one more. So this one's titled The Cultural Legitimacy of Veganism. A frustrating experience I've had when discussing food, culture, and travel with non-vegans is that they perceive my desire to experience the food of other cultures as a vegan to be unserious or frivolous. To be clear, I'm fully aware that across many cultures, meat is an important and even central component of traditional cuisine. However, I am also of the opinion that, particularly in Western cultures, the rising prominence of plant-based diets is causing people across the world to center already plant-based dishes, adapt animal-based ones, and even create brand new cultural foods. To mine, visiting a country and seeking out vegan food lets me experience one of the forefronts of culinary culture, while also getting to enjoy foods which were already plant-based anyway. I think a lot of this comes from stereotypes and thinking of cultures as both monolithic and static. People seem surprised when I talk about how prominent veganism is in places like Germany, even in comparison to Australia, which is already a fairly vegan-friendly country, because people's perception of German food culture here often starts and ends at schnitzels, bratwurst, pretzels, and beer. I find this to happen less if we're discussing food that has a broadly well-understood vegetarian or vegan basis, such as Thai or Indian. It's a pretty minor issue in the grand scheme of things, but niggles at me sometimes. I want to experience real, insert country food. It's just one of the many things meat eaters tell themselves to legitimize their position and avoid confronting cognitive dissonance. I think it's interesting how she's talking about how all around the world people are starting to bring their plant-based meals to the front and center, trying, vegan meat alternatives and stuff, because it's true. I've seen travel vlogs in like Bali, for example, where they have like vegan eggs served at restaurants and lots of like meat replacements, but also a lot of cultural foods are already vegan. All around the world there are plant-based meals that are staples to people. This is going to be the end for now, guys, but thank you so much for joining me. Leave in the comments what you think below and what you want me to talk about in another video. Bye.